She held the plate that would ruin her life. One wrong ingredient, a billionaire known for destroying careers with a single phone call. Most people would have hidden the mistake, hoping he wouldn't notice until it was too late. But Ara Vance didn't hide it. In a world full of liars, she did the unthinkable. She told the truth, knowing it would cost her everything. She didn't know that this act of honesty was being watched by the one man who had lost faith in humanity. What happens when a waitress brings the wrong order to the most powerful man in the city? The answer will leave you in tears. This is the story of how a spilled secret built an empire. The rain in Seattle didn't wash away the grime. It just made the neon lights of the city reflect harder off the pavement. Inside Luciel, arguably the most pretentious and expensive restaurant in the Pacific Northwest, the air was dry, scented with truffle oil and the heavy perfume of old money. Ara Vance adjusted her apron, wincing as the knot dug into her lower back. She had been on her feet for hours. Her shoes, cheap knockoffs she'd bought at a thrift store, were failing her, but she couldn't afford to care. Her younger brother Toby was waiting for a kidney transplant, and the medication required to keep him stable until a donor was found cost more than most people made in a month. Vance. The sharp bark of Marcus Gentry, the floor manager, made her jump. Marcus was a man who wore suits that were too tight, attempting to project a power he didn't possess. He had slicked back hair and eyes that constantly darted around the room looking for someone to blame. "Yes, Mr. Gentry," Ara said, keeping her head down. "Table 1. You're taking it?" Marcus said, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Ara felt the blood drain from her face. Table 1 wasn't just a table. It was a test. It was reserved for the kind of clientele who didn't look at the menu prices. "But Sarah usually takes the VIPs," Ara stammered. "I've only been on the floor for weeks." "Sarah called in sick," Marcus lied. Ara knew he was lying. She had seen Sarah crying in the alleyway minutes ago because Marcus had sent her home for smiling too much. "Unless you don't want the tips. I hear Toby's meds are getting pricier." Ara stiffened. Marcus knew about her situation. He used it like a leash. "I'll take it," she whispered. "Good. And listen closely, Vance. The guest is Julian Thorne." The kitchen went silent. Even the head chef, a temperamental Frenchman named Laurent, paused mid-chop. Julian Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Capital, the man who acquired companies, stripped them for parts, and left thousands unemployed, all while increasing his net worth to numbers that didn't feel real. He was known as the Ice King of Seattle. He was also known for having zero tolerance for incompetence. Rumor had it he once bought a restaurant building just to evict the owner because his steak was overcooked. "He's bringing a guest," Marcus continued, checking his watch. "Vanessa Sterling, the model. High maintenance. If you mess this up, Ayara, don't bother coming back for your final paycheck. I'll make sure you're blacklisted from every diner within 100 miles. Ara nodded, her hands trembling slightly. She smoothed her skirt, took a deep breath, and walked out onto the floor. The heavy oak doors opened, and the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. It was like the air pressure dropped. Julian Thorne walked in. He was taller than he looked in magazines, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with lethal precision. His eyes were the color of steel, and they scanned the room with a look of utter boredom. On his arm was Vanessa Sterling, a woman so beautiful it felt aggressive. She was wearing a red dress that cost more than Ara's entire life earnings. Ara guided them to the private alcove, the best seat in the house overlooking the rainy skyline. "Good evening, Mr. Thorne. Miss Sterling," Ara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My name is Ara, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Julian didn't look at her. He was already checking emails on his phone. Vanessa, however, looked her up and down with a sneer. "Water, sparkling, no ice," Vanessa commanded, tossing her clutch onto the table. "And tell the chef I want the tasting menu, but if I see a single carbohydrate, I'm leaving." "Of course," Ara said. She turned to Julian. "And for you, sir?" Julian finally looked up. His gaze was intense, stripping away her defenses. He looked tired, not physically, but existentially. "The steak au poivre," he said, his voice deep and rough. "Rare. And listen to me very carefully." He leaned in. "I have a severe, life-threatening allergy to cilantro. Not a preference, an allergy. If a leaf of it touches my plate, my throat closes up. Do you understand?" Absolutely, Mr. Thorne, Era said, writing it down in bold letters. No cilantro. I will personally oversee it. See that you do, he said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Ara rushed to the kitchen. She punched the order in, then walked directly to Chef Laurent. Table 1, she announced. Thorne wants the au poivre. Deadly allergy to cilantro. Chef, please, I can't lose this job. Laurent nodded, wiping his hands on a towel. Relax, chérie. I cook for Thorne once a month. I know the drill. No green stuff, go. Ara exhaled. It was going to be okay. She focused on the service, pouring the wine, refilling the water, making herself invisible. But she didn't see Marcus gently standing in the shadows of the pass, watching the ticket machine with a look of pure malice. Marcus had been skimming tips from the waitstaff for months, and last week Ara had accidentally walked in on him adjusting their cash logs. She hadn't said anything, but Marcus was paranoid. He needed her gone, and he needed it to look like gross negligence, so she would have no credibility if she ever reported him. As Laurent turned his back to plate the appetizers for another table, Marcus slipped into the line. He reached for a small container of chopped herbs, a mix of parsley and cilantro used for the cheaper lunch tacos, and sprinkled a fine dusting over the peppercorn sauce simmering in the pan meant for Julian Thorne. He stirred it in. The sauce was dark. The herbs vanished into the rich brown glaze. "Order up, Vance!" Marcus shouted, stepping back quickly. Ara ran over. The steak looked perfect. The smell was divine. She checked the plate. No visible greens. "Chef, this is safe?" she asked one last time. Laurent, who hadn't seen Marcus, glanced over his shoulder. Yes, yes, go. The sauce is breaking if it sits." Ara lifted the heavy tray. She took a deep breath. She was steps away from disaster. The walk from the kitchen to table 1 felt like a mile. The restaurant was buzzing, but Ara was in a tunnel of focus. She balanced the tray, the heat of the steak radiating against her arm. As she approached the table, Julian and Vanessa were in the middle of a tense conversation. "It's a merger, Vanessa, not a marriage," Julian was saying, his voice low but sharp. "Stop planning the wedding." "You need me, Julian," Vanessa hissed, sipping her wine. "The board thinks you're a robot. I make you look human." Era hesitated, waiting for a break in the conversation. She set Vanessa's carb-free salad down first. Vanessa didn't acknowledge her. Then Era reached for Julian's plate. As she lowered the steak toward the white tablecloth, a waft of steam rose up and hit her face. Ara grew up in a house with an herb garden. Her mother, before she passed, used to make salsa every Sunday. Ara knew the smell of cilantro better than she knew her own perfume. It was faint, almost masked by the heavy cream and black pepper of the au poivre sauce. But it was there, that distinct, soapy, metallic tang. She froze. The plate was hovering inches above the table. Julian looked at the plate, then up at her, his eyes narrowed. "Is there a problem?" Ara's mind raced. "Maybe I'm imagining it. Chef Laurent said it was safe. Marcus was watching the line. If I take this back, Julian will be furious about the delay. He might leave. I'll lose my tip. I'll lose my job." Marcus was watching from the service station, his arms crossed, a smug grin plastered on his face. He was waiting for the show. If she served it, Julian might just get an itchy throat, or he might die. The medical bills for Toby flashed in her mind. 4,000 due by Friday. If she got fired tonight, Toby wouldn't get his treatment. Just serve it. A dark voice whispered in her head. "You're just a waitress. If the chef messed up, it's on the chef." Julian's patience was snapping. "Miss, my dinner." Ara looked at the man. He was powerful, rich, and rude, but he was a human being. She pulled the plate back. "I can't serve this," Ara said, her voice shaking but clear. The restaurant seemed to go silent. Vanessa laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Excuse me? Did you just decide to eat it yourself?" "No," Ara said, clutching the hot plate. I smell cilantro." Julian stared at her. "The chef knows my allergy. You're telling me the head chef of Luciel tried to poison me?" "I don't know, sir, but I know what I smell, and I'm not willing to risk your life on a guess." Marcus Gentry stormed over, sensing his plan was going off the rails. He grabbed Ara's arm hard. "What is the meaning of this?" Marcus hissed, his fake smile straining. "Mr. Thorne, I apologize." This girl is incompetent. She's new. He turned to Era, his eyes bulging. Put the plate down, Vance. Stop making a scene. There is cilantro in the sauce, Marcus, Era insisted, stepping back. Don't be ridiculous, Marcus snapped. Chef Laurent is a Michelin star chef. You are a high school dropout waitress. Put the plate down. He reached for the plate to force her to serve it. Era yanked it away. No! The sudden movement caused the heavy ceramic plate to tilt. The steak, the potatoes, and the hot pepper cream sauce slid off the china. It didn't hit the table. It didn't hit the floor. It landed directly in the lap of Julian Thorne's $5,000 Dolce & Gabbana Italian wool suit. The splash was audible. The hot sauce soaked instantly into the fabric, scalding his skin. The entire restaurant gasped. Vanessa screamed, "Oh my God, you clumsy idiot!" Marcus looked like he was about to have a stroke. "You're fired!" he screamed, not caring about the customers anymore. "Get out. You are done in this town." Era stood frozen, horrified. Her hands were empty, her apron stained. She looked at Julian. Julian Thorne didn't yell. He didn't jump up. He sat perfectly still, looking down at the ruined suit, then slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. His face was unreadable, a mask of cold fury. He stood up, sauce dripping from his jacket. He picked up a cloth napkin and wiped his hand. "Get the chef," Julian said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more weight than Marcus's screaming. "Mr. Thorne, I am so sorry," Marcus groveled, practically bowing. "She is leaving immediately. I will comp the entire meal. I will pay for the suit." "I said," Julian repeated it, his eyes never leaving Ara's terrified face. "Get the chef." Laurent came running out of the kitchen, looking pale. "Mr. Thorne, what happened?" "This waitress," Julian pointed a sauced finger at Ara, "claims there is cilantro in this sauce. She threw it on me rather than let me eat it. Is she crazy, Laurent? Or is she right?" Laurent looked at the mess on the floor. He knelt down, dipped his finger into the spilled sauce on the carpet, and tasted it. Laurent's eyes went wide. He spat into a napkin immediately. "Sacre bleu," Laurent whispered. He looked up, his face gray. There is cilantro. A lot of it." The silence that followed was heavy. Julian turned back to Era. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, trembling from the adrenaline and the knowledge that she was about to be homeless. Julian ignored the sauce burning his leg. He took a step toward her. "You knew?" he asked. I smelled it," Era squeaked. "Manager," Julian said, not looking at Marcus. "Yes, sir." Marcus's voice cracked. "You told her to serve it. I heard you." I assumed the chef was right. I didn't know." "And she," Julian gestured to Era, "refused your direct order because she thought it would hurt me." Julian reached into his pocket, the one that wasn't soaked, and pulled out a black card. He dropped it on the table. "I'm buying the restaurant," Julian stated. Vanessa blinked. "Julian, what?" "I'm buying the restaurant right now. Get the owner on the phone." He turned to Ara. "What is your name?" Ara Vance." "Well, Ara Vance, you're fired." Ara's heart shattered. She sobbed, a choked sound escaping her throat. She had saved his life and he was firing her anyway. "Wait," Julian said, raising a hand. "You're fired from this position. You're too smart to be carrying plates, and you're too honest to work for a liar like him." He pointed at Marcus. "Go home. Change your clothes. Be at Thorne Tower, 40th floor, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock a.m. Don't be late." For what?" Ara asked, stunned. Julian finally cracked a smile. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. "I need someone to taste my food and help me clean house. We have a lot of work to do." He turned to Marcus, whose face was the color of milk. "As for you, run." The bus ride home to the south side was a blur of neon lights in rain-streaked windows. Ara Vance sat in the back, clutching her purse to her chest. Her uniform still smelled of the rich peppercorn sauce that had ruined a $5,000 suit. She lived in a building that the city had forgotten. The elevator had been broken for years, so she walked up the 6 flights of stairs, her legs screaming in protest. When she unlocked the door to apartment 6B, the sound of a harsh, rattling cough greeted her. "Laura!" Toby was sitting on the couch wrapped in 3 blankets despite the heater blasting. He was 22, but he looked 15. The kidney disease had stripped the muscle from his frame, leaving him hollow-cheeked and gray. Era forced a smile, locking the door behind her. "Hey, T-Bear, how you feeling?" "Like I went 10 rounds with Tyson," Toby joked weakly. He looked at her, his eyes scanning her stained apron. "Rough night. You smell like expensive pepper." Era sat down next to him, the exhaustion finally crashing over her. She couldn't tell him she was fired, not yet. The stress would spike his blood pressure, and the doctor had said that was dangerous. "Just a spill," she lied. "But I have news. I might be getting a new job, a better one." "Yeah?" Toby's eyes lit up. "Does it come with health insurance? Because the pharmacy called. They won't refill the immunosuppressants without a payment." Era's stomach twisted. "I'm handling it, Toby. Don't worry." She went to her room, a closet she had converted into a sleeping space so Toby could have the real bedroom, and stared at the ceiling. She didn't sleep. She spent the entire night replaying the moment she tipped the plate. "Why did I do it?" she asked herself. Marcus would have been blamed. Julian Thorne is a billionaire. He has the best doctors in the world. He probably carries an EpiPen. But she knew why, because Ara, for all her bad luck, had a moral compass that pointed true north even when it led her off a cliff. Ara stood in front of Thorne Tower. It was a monolith of black glass and steel, piercing the gray Seattle sky like a needle. It was a fortress. Men and women in sharp suits streamed into the lobby, talking into headsets, looking important. Ara, wearing her only nice outfit, a navy blue blazer she'd found at Goodwill and a pair of black slacks, felt like an intruder. She approached the security desk. A guard with a neck as thick as a tree trunk looked her up and down. "Delivery entrance is in the back," he grunted. "I'm here to see Mr. Thorne," Ara said, trying to project confidence. "I have an appointment." The guard laughed. "Sure you do, sweetheart. Mr. Thorne is in a board meeting. Move along." "Call up," Ara insisted. "My name is Ara Vance." The guard sighed, rolled his eyes, and picked up the phone. "I got a Vance down here, claims she has an appointment." He paused. His face went pale. He straightened his spine instantly. "Yes, sir. Immediately, sir." He hung up and looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. "Top floor. Private elevator on the far left. Use this pass." The elevator ride made her ears pop. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, Ara stepped onto plush, white carpet. The office wasn't an office. It was a sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was minimalist, stark, and terrifyingly expensive. Julian Thorne was standing by the window, looking out at the city he practically owned. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket today, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that hinted he didn't just sit behind a desk all day. "You're early," Julian said without turning around. "I like early." "Mr. Thorne." He turned. His expression was unreadable. "Sit." He gestured to a leather chair in front of his desk. Ara sat. She felt small. "I pulled your file, Ara," Julian said, picking up a tablet. "High school graduate with honors. Accepted to University of Washington, but you never attended. Why?" "My mother died that summer," Ara said quietly. "And Toby got sick. I needed to work." "You've had 6 jobs in 4 years. Waitress, barista, retail, warehouse, stocker. You were fired from the warehouse. Why?" "I reported a safety violation. The foreman didn't like it." "So you have a habit of speaking up when you shouldn't," Julian mused. He placed the tablet down and leaned forward. "Let's talk about last night." "I'm sorry about the suit," Ara blurted out. "The suit is irrelevant. I want to know about the cilantro. How did you know?" "I have sensitive senses," she explained. "Smell, mostly. It's a curse, usually. I can smell damp in a wall before a pipe bursts. I could smell the cilantro through the cream sauce. And the manager, Marcus, he hated me." Ara said, "He was skimming tips. I saw him doing the logs once. He knew I knew. He wanted me gone. I think, I think he tampered with the sauce to make me look incompetent. He didn't know about your allergy. He just thought you'd send it back and cause a scene." Julian nodded slowly. "That matches what my investigators found this morning. Gentry attempted to flee the city last night. He was apprehended at the airport. He confessed to tampering with the food to teach you a lesson." He's currently facing felony charges for food tampering and attempted assault. Era let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. So I'm not crazy. No, you're observant and dangerously honest. Julian stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the edge just inches from her. Most people in my life, Ara, tell me what I want to hear. They lie to protect their jobs, their bonuses, their status. Last night, you protected me at the cost of your livelihood. Do you know how rare that is? It's just what you do, Era shrugged. Not in my world, Julian replied darkly. In my world, everyone has a price. I want to know yours. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a contract, role, executive aide. Era read, her eyes widening at the salary. It was 6 figures. It was more money than she had ever seen. I don't have a degree, she whispered. I don't need a degree. I have an army of MBAs who can't tell when someone is lying to their face. I need a second pair of eyes. I need someone who can smell the cilantro in the sauce. Metaphorically speaking. Julian looked at her intently. You will be my shadow. You will sit in meetings. You will travel with me. And you will tell me the truth even when I don't want to hear it. Can you do that? Era thought of Toby. This money would pay for the transplant. It would save his life. Yes, she said. Good. Julian reached into his drawer and pulled out a check. This is a signing bonus. It should cover the arrears on your brother's medical bills. I had my team call the hospital this morning. Era froze. Tears welled in her eyes. You didn't have to. I protect my investments, Julian said, his voice softening just a fraction. Go to HR on the 10th floor. Get your badge. Then go to the boutique downstairs. Get clothes that fit the role. We have a lunch meeting. Who are we meeting? Ara asked, wiping her eyes. Julian's face hardened. Silas Vane, the man trying to hostile take over my company. And I need to know if he's bluffing. The private dining room was suffocatingly quiet until Silas Vane entered. He was a large man with a red face and a smile that showed too many teeth. He smelled of expensive cologne and faintly of stale scotch. Julian, Silas boomed, slapping Julian on the back. And who is this delight? Ara Vance, my associate, Julian said coolly, sitting down. Associate? Did you finally fire that stiff Beatrice? Silas laughed, sliding into his chair. He ordered a bottle of wine immediately, despite it being noon. The lunch was a battlefield. Silas spoke in rapid-fire business jargon. Equity splits, offshore holdings, tax shelters. Ara felt lost in the vocabulary, but she focused on the man. She watched his hands, she watched his eyes, she smelled the air. The Golden Umbrella Initiative covers all your liabilities in the Hong Kong sector, Silas said, leaning in, his eyes gleaming. It's a sweetheart deal, Julian. I take the risk. You keep the brand. I just want a seat on the board. Julian swirled his water glass. It seems generous, Silas. Why? Because I respect you and I want to stabilize the market. Silas took a large gulp of wine. Era felt a prickle on the back of her neck. She watched Silas's left hand. Every time he mentioned the Hong Kong sector, he tapped his ring finger against the table. Tap, tap, tap. And there was a smell, not the scotch. Under the cologne, under the food, there was something faint. Ink. Fresh chemical printer ink. And something sharp, ozone, like static electricity or overheated electronics. It was coming from his briefcase, which he had set on the floor next to him but cracked open slightly. Silas was sweating, not from the heat but a cold, clammy sheen on his forehead. So, Silas pushed a document across the table. Sign the intent letter. Let's make history. Julian picked up the pen. He looked at the document. It was a standard intent to merge. Ara kicked Julian's shin under the table, hard. Julian didn't flinch, but he paused. He looked at Era. She stared back, her eyes wide, slightly shaking her head. Don't do it. Julian set the pen down. I need to review this with legal, Silas. Silas's smile faltered. Legal? You are the law at Thorn Capital, Julian. Come on. Don't tell me you need a babysitter to check your homework. He glared at Era. I'm not signing today, Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. You're making a mistake, Silas snapped, his face turning a darker shade of red. The offer expires at midnight. Then let it expire. Julian stood up. Era, let's go. As soon as the car door does slam shut, Julian turned to her. Talk. You kicked me. That deal was worth $200 million. He's desperate, Ara said, her breath coming fast. Explain. He tapped his finger every time he mentioned Hong Kong. He's nervous about that specifically, and he smells like ozone and fresh ink. So, my dad, before he left us, worked in a server farm. Burnt servers smell like ozone. Silas smells like he's been standing inside a burning server room. Julian frowned. He pulled out his phone and dialed his head of security. Run a deeper diagnostic on Vane's Hong Kong servers. Not the financials, the physical hardware. Now. He waited. The car hummed in silence. Ara twisted her hands in her lap, terrified she had just cost her boss a fortune based on a smell. Minutes passed. Julian's phone buzzed. He put it on speaker. Mr. Thorne. The voice on the line was urgent. You were right. We just got satellite thermal imaging. Vane's main data center in Kowloon had a massive electrical fire days ago. It's gutted. He's trying to offload the company before the news breaks that he's lost all his client data. Julian hung up. He looked at Ara with a mixture of shock and awe. If I had signed that, Julian whispered, I would have absorbed a company with zero assets and massive liability. It would have tanked my stock by 40%. He leaned back, exhaling a long breath. You just saved me $300 million, Ara. $100 million. I just noticed the smell, she stammered. You noticed what no one else did. The car pulled up to Thorne Tower, but as they got out, the paparazzi were waiting. Flashes blinded them. Reporters were shouting, Mr. Thorne, who is the mystery woman? Is it true you fired Marcus Gentry? Are you and Vanessa Sterling over? Julian shielded Ara, guiding her through the crush of bodies. But just as they reached the revolving doors, a voice cut through the noise like a knife. Julian, Vanessa Sterling stepped out of the lobby. She looked perfect as always, but her eyes were venomous. She looked at Julian, then slowly shifted her gaze to Ara. Vanessa didn't scream. She didn't make a scene. She walked right up to Ara, towering over her in 6-inch heels. So, Vanessa purred, her voice low enough that only Ara could hear. You're the little waitress who spilled the sauce. I work for Mr. Thorne now, Ara said, trying to stand her ground. Vanessa laughed, a cold, dry sound. She reached out and plucked a piece of lint off Ara's new blazer. Enjoy the clothes, darling. They're rentals, just like you. Vanessa turned to Julian and kissed him on the cheek, staking her claim. Dinner tonight, darling. We have to discuss the engagement party. Julian looked at Ara, then at Vanessa. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Ara is coming with me, Julian said. We have work to do. Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went dead. Of course. Bring the help. It'll be educational. As they walked to the elevators, Ara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She had survived Silas Vane, but she had a feeling that Vanessa Sterling was a predator of an entirely different species. And she was right, because Vanessa wasn't just jealous. She was the one who had introduced Marcus Gentry to the restaurant in the first place. The web of lies at Thorne Tower was bigger than Ara realized, and she had just walked into the center of it. The glass house was not a nickname. It was a literal description of Julian Thorne's private estate on the cliffs of Mercer Island. It was a sprawling modernist structure made almost entirely of reinforced transparent walls, cantilevered over the dark waters of Lake Washington. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly exposed, much like Julian himself. Tonight was the engagement gown. The press was calling it the merger of the century. The union of the Thorne and Sterling families was ostensibly about love, but everyone in the room knew it was about consolidating shipping lanes and tech patents. Ara stood in the corner of the grand ballroom, feeling like an imposter in a fairy tale. Julian had insisted she attend. I need my eyes and ears, he had said. He had even sent a dress, a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like water under the crystal chandeliers. It was modest, elegant, and far more expensive than the house she grew up in. From across the room, Julian caught her eye. He was surrounded by senators and board members, looking trapped. He raised his glass slightly in her direction, a microscopic gesture of solidarity. Don't get comfortable, Cinderella. Ara stiffened. Vanessa Sterling appeared beside her, smelling of champagne and malice. Vanessa wore white, a bridal power move, and diamonds that looked heavy enough to bruise. "It's a beautiful party, Miss Sterling," Ara said politely. "It's a shark tank," Vanessa corrected, leaning in close. "And you're bleeding. Do you really think he cares about you? You're a novelty, a little charity case he picked up to make himself feel human. Once the novelty wears off, you'll be back scrubbing tables." "I'm here to work, Vanessa," Ara said, her voice steady. "Julian trusts me." "Julian trusts no one," Vanessa snapped. "And by the end of the night, he won't even look at you." Vanessa swanned away, disappearing into the crowd. Ara felt a knot of unease in her stomach. She started her rounds, weaving through the crowd, listening to snippets of conversation, checking for threats to Julian's empire. She needed a moment of quiet. She slipped away from the noise, heading down a corridor that led to the library. The glass walls here looked out into the dense, rain-soaked forest surrounding the estate. She heard a voice, low, urgent, and angry. It was coming from the terrace just outside the library. The door was cracked open, a sliver. Ara pressed herself against the wall. It was Vanessa. "I don't care about the timeline, Marcus. Just get it done," Vanessa hissed into her phone. Ara's heart hammered against her ribs. Vanessa had bailed Marcus out. They were working together. It made sense now. The cilantro incident wasn't just Marcus being petty. It was a coordinated attack to destabilize Julian, perhaps to make him sick enough that Vanessa could take power of attorney over the company during the merger talks. Ara turned to run to find Julian, but she collided with a solid wall of muscle. She gasped. It was Julian. "Ara," he looked concerned, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Julian, we have to talk," she whispered, grabbing his arm. "It's Vanessa. She's—" "Shh." Julian put a finger to her lips, pulling her into the shadows of the library. "Not here. There are cameras everywhere." He looked tired, his guard down for the first time. He looked at her, really looked at her, and his expression softened. "I hate these parties," he murmured. "Everyone wants something." "I don't want anything," Ara said softly. "I just want you to be safe." Julian stayed silent for a long moment. The distance between them vanished. The air in the library felt charged, electric. He reached out his hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. His fingers were warm. "I know," he said, his voice rough. "That's why you're the only person I can tolerate right now." He leaned in. For a second, Ara thought he was going to kiss her. Her breath hitched. She wanted him to. She wanted to forget the contract, the class difference, the danger. "Julian," a voice boomed from the doorway. It was one of the board members. Julian pulled back instantly, the mask of the CEO sliding back into place. "Duty calls," he said, though his eyes lingered on hers with a look of regret. "Stay close, Ara. I have a bad feeling about tonight." He left. Ara stood there, her heart racing. She had to tell him about Marcus. But before she could move, the lights in the entire house flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the glass house. Screams erupted from the ballroom. "Stay calm. Emergency generators engaging in 10 seconds. A security guard's voice bellowed over the commotion. Ara fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark library. Crash. The sound came from the study adjoining the library, Julian's private office. Ara ran toward the sound. "Hello?" She pushed the door open. The office was empty, but the window was shattered. Rain and wind were whipping into the room, and the wall safe, the one hidden behind a painting, was hanging wide open. "Hey!" Ara shouted, spotting a shadow climbing out the window. The figure turned. The beam of her flashlight hit his face. It was Marcus Gentry. He grinned, a jagged, hateful look. He was holding a small silver hard drive. "Say goodbye, waitress," he sneered. He vaulted over the balcony and vanished into the dark woods. Ara rushed to the window, but he was gone. The lights flickered back on. "What is going on here?" Vanessa Sterling stood in the doorway of the office, flanked by 2 security guards and Julian. "He was here," Ara shouted, pointing at the window. "Marcus, he stole the drive." Julian walked into the room. He looked at the shattered window, then at the open safe. His face went pale. That drive contained the encryption keys to his entire financial empire. "Marcus Gentry is in jail, Ara," Vanessa said smoothly. "Stop making up stories." "I heard you on the phone," Ara yelled, losing her composure. "You bailed him out. You told him to come here." Vanessa gasped, clutching her chest. Julian, she's hysterical. I've been with the senator's wife for the last 20 minutes. You can ask her. Julian looked at Era. Era, did you open the safe? No, I walked in and saw him. Check her bag, Vanessa commanded the guards. Vanessa, that's not necessary, Julian said, his voice tight. Check her bag. Julian, look at the safe. There's no forced entry on the keypad. Someone used the code. Who is the only other person you gave the code to this morning for the audit? Julian went still. He had given Ara the code that morning to retrieve a file. Ara, Julian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Give them your bag. Ara's hand shook as she handed her clutch to the head of security. She knew it was empty. She knew she was innocent. The guard opened the bag. He reached inside and pulled out a small silver object. It wasn't the hard drive. It was a diamond necklace. Vanessa's engagement necklace, worth $2 million. The room went silent. My necklace, Vanessa shrieked. I took it off in the powder room. She must have swiped it. Ara stared at the diamonds dangling from the guard's hand. I've never seen that before. She planted it. Julian, please. Julian took the necklace from the guard. He looked at the shattered window, then at the diamonds, then at Ara. The hard drive, Julian said. Where is it? Marcus has it, Ara cried. He jumped out the window. Security sweeps show no one entered or exited the perimeter, the guard reported. The sensors are active. If someone went out that window, the alarms would have triggered before the power cut. The power cut came from inside the house. It was a perfect frame. Julian closed his eyes. When he opened them, the warmth from the library was gone. The Ice King had returned. You used the blackout to stage a theft, Julian said, his voice devoid of emotion. You broke the window to make it look like a break-in. You took the drive, and you got greedy and took the necklace. No, Ara stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Julian, look at me. I don't lie. I told you about the cilantro. I told you about the server fire. Why would I do this? Because everyone has a price, Julian said coldly, and I guess you found yours. Call the police, Vanessa said, a smirk dancing on her lips. No, Julian said. Julian, she's a thief. I said no. Julian walked up to Ara. He looked down at her, his eyes searching hers for a second, a flash of pain visible before he buried it. Get out, he whispered. Julian, get out, he roared, the sound echoing off the glass walls. You are fired. If I see you near me or my company again, I will have you arrested. Go back to your life, Ara. You never belonged here. Ara sobbed, a broken, jagged sound. She looked at Vanessa, who was beaming with triumph. She looked at Julian, who refused to meet her gaze. She turned and ran. She ran out of the office, through the ballroom, and out into the pouring rain. She didn't have a key. She didn't have a coat. She walked miles to the bus stop in the freezing rain. Her expensive silk dress ruined, her heart shattered. When she finally got back to her apartment, soaking wet and shivering, she found the door unlocked. Toby, she called out, panic rising. The apartment was empty. On the kitchen table, there was a note. Miss Vance, due to a processing error with your insurance and the sudden termination of your employment status reported by Thorn Capital, your brother's pre-approval for surgery has been revoked. He has been transferred to the county facility. Please contact billing immediately. Ara fell to her knees. She had lost her job. She had lost her reputation. She had lost the man she was falling in love with. And now, because of Vanessa's lie, she was going to lose her brother. She screamed into the empty room, a sound of pure despair. But as she hit the floor, her hand brushed against something in her pocket, something she hadn't put there. She pulled it out. It was a small, crumpled cocktail napkin. On it, written in handwriting she recognized, Julian's sharp, angular script, were 3 words: find the camera. Ara stared at the napkin. Julian must have slipped it into her pocket when he grabbed her arm during the confrontation. Or perhaps when he took the necklace. Find the camera. He hadn't believed them. He had put on a show, but what camera? The house was full of them, and Vanessa controlled the feeds. Then she remembered the library. The glass house was transparent. The window Marcus had broken faced the woods, but the woods were monitored by trail cams for wildlife research. Julian supported a local university study. They weren't part of the security grid. Vanessa wouldn't know about them. Ara wiped her tears. She stood up. She wasn't done. She grabbed her coat. She wasn't going to let Toby die, and she wasn't going to let Julian fall. She was going back to the lion's den. The rain had turned the forest floor into a sludge of mud and pine needles. Ara slipped, her knees hitting the wet earth hard, but she scrambled back up. She didn't feel the cold. She didn't feel the pain. She only felt the burning need to prove the truth. She wasn't heading back to the house. She knew she couldn't get past the gate. Instead, she remembered something Julian had mentioned during their first tour of the property. The University of Washington had set up motion sensor cameras in the tree line to track local coyote populations. They were completely analog, disconnected from the house's Wi-Fi, and therefore invisible to Vanessa's hackers. She found the orange marker on a tree about 50 yards from the shattered library window. There, strapped to the bark, was a small camouflage box. Her fingers trembled as she unlatched the casing. "Please let it be working. Please." She popped the SD card out. She didn't have a computer. She ran back to the main road, flagging down a taxi with the last $20 in her pocket. "Internet cafe," she gasped. "Anywhere with a card reader." Minutes later, in a dingy 24-hour gaming cafe, Ara plugged the card into a terminal. She scrolled through hundreds of clips of raccoons and deer. Then she saw it. The footage was grainy night vision green, but the faces were unmistakable. It didn't just show Marcus jumping out the window. It showed what happened before. The camera angle looked directly into the library terrace. It captured Vanessa Sterling standing outside the glass. It showed Marcus handing the stolen hard drive to Vanessa through the crack in the door, and then it showed Vanessa handing Marcus the diamond necklace and giving him a signal. Marcus broke the window after he was already outside to stage the break-in. Vanessa had the drive the whole time. She had hidden it in her dress. Ara grabbed the phone at the front desk. She dialed the only number she had memorized, not Julian's. He wouldn't answer. She called the police. The next morning, the conference room at Thorne Capital was a funeral parlor. The board of directors sat in silence. Julian sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Vanessa Sterling sat to his right, wearing a modest black dress, playing the role of the supportive, grieving partner. "It breaks my heart to say this," Vanessa said, her voice trembling theatrically. "But Julian is compromised. This breach, the loss of the encryption keys, it proves he can no longer protect this company. And his judgment, hiring that waitress, it shows a mental decline." "I agree," Silas Vane said from the other end of the table. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence. Vanessa Sterling should be appointed interim CEO until the merger is complete." "Seconded," a board member muttered. Julian didn't speak. He just stared at the table, spinning a pen between his fingers. "All in favor?" Silas asked. Hands began to rise. Bam! The heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open. Ara Vance stood there. Her clothes were dried and wrinkled. Her hair was a mess and she looked exhausted, but her eyes were blazing. Two police officers stood behind her. "You can't be here," Vanessa stood up, her face twisting in shock. "Security!" "I have the floor," Ara announced, her voice ringing out. She didn't look at Julian. She looked directly at the screen at the front of the room. "And I have the proof." She marched past the stunned board members and plugged a USB drive into the main console. "What is this nonsense?" Silas shouted. "Watch," Julian said. It was the first time he had spoken. He stopped spinning the pen. He looked at Ara, and a slow, proud smile spread across his face. The video played. The room went deathly silent as they watched Vanessa Sterling, the woman currently asking to run the company, orchestrate the theft of its most valuable asset. They watched her hand the necklace to Marcus to frame Ara. The video ended. Vanessa froze. Her face went from pale to ghostly white. She looked at Julian. "Julian, it's a deep fake. It's AI. She made it." Julian stood up. He walked over to Vanessa. "The footage is from an analog trail cam, Vanessa. It's unhackable. And the police have already picked up Marcus. He's cutting a deal right now. He says you promised him $5 million and a flight to Rio." Vanessa scrambled back, knocking over her chair. "I did it for us. You were too weak to make the merger work." "Officers," Julian nodded to the policeman. "Vanessa Sterling, you are under arrest for corporate espionage, grand larceny, and conspiracy, the officer said, snapping handcuffs onto her wrists. As they dragged a screaming Vanessa out of the room, Silas Vane tried to sneak out the back door. "Sit down, Silas," Julian barked. "We're going to talk about that Hong Kong fire." Silas collapsed into his chair, defeated. The board members looked at each other, then at Julian, then at the disheveled waitress standing by the projector. "Motion to dismiss the vote?" Julian asked calmly. "Motion passed," the chairman stammered. The room cleared out fast, leaving only Julian and Ara. Ara unplugged the drive. Her adrenaline crashed. She felt her knees give way. Julian caught her before she hit the floor. "You knew," she whispered into his chest, "the note. You knew." "I suspected," Julian said, holding her tight, "but I couldn't prove it. Vanessa had bugs in my office, spyware on my phone. If I had gone to the woods, she would have seen me. I needed someone she didn't respect. Someone she thought was just help. You. You fired me," Ara accused him, pulling back, tears stinging her eyes. "You humiliated me." "I had to," Julian said, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. "If she thought you were still my ally, she would have hurt you. I had to make you look like a victim, so she would ignore you long enough for you to find the camera. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." "And Toby?" Ara asked, her voice breaking. The note about his surgery. "Vanessa canceled the surgery through HR," Julian admitted. "But I reinstated it personally early this morning. The hospital is prepping him right now. The helicopter is waiting on the roof to take you to him." Ara stared at him. "You sent a helicopter?" "I almost lost you, Ara. I'm not taking any more chances." Julian took her hand. "You saved my life with the cilantro. You saved my company with the server fire. And today you saved my soul. I don't want an executive aide anymore." "No. No, I need a partner in every sense of the word." He kissed her. It wasn't a billionaire kissing a waitress, but a man kissing the only woman who had ever told him the truth. Ara sat in the private booth at Luciel. The restaurant was under new management. Hers. Toby sat across from her, looking healthy and vibrant, devouring a steak. "So," Toby chewed happily, "is the boss coming?" "He's on his way." Ara smiled, checking her watch. Julian walked in. He didn't look tired anymore. He looked happy. He slid into the booth next to Ara and kissed her cheek. "How's the empire?" Ara asked. "Honest," Julian replied. "Profits are down, but I sleep better at night." The new waiter approached the table. He was young, nervous, and his hands were shaking. He placed a plate of pasta in front of Julian. Ara sniffed the air. She smelled it instantly. Peanut oil. Julian was allergic to peanuts. She looked at the waiter. He looked terrified. Ara smiled gently. She didn't yell. She didn't fire him. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I think there might be a mistake with the oil. Let's just get a fresh one, okay? No harm done." The waiter looked at her like she was an angel. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm so sorry." Julian watched her, his eyes full of love. "You're too nice," he teased. "Someone has to be," Ara said, taking his hand. "Besides, everyone deserves a second chance. Even billionaires." Ara Vance proved that in a world obsessed with appearances, the truth is the only currency that matters. She lost her job, her reputation, and almost her hope. But she never compromised her integrity. Vanessa Sterling and Marcus Gentry had all the money and power, but they built their castle on lies. And it only took one honest person to bring it crashing down. It reminds us that no matter how dark the situation gets, the truth always has a way of coming into the light. Sometimes it just needs a little help from a waitress who pays attention to the details. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Ayara's shoes? Would you have served the steak or spilled it? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching. In the gripping tale of Ara Vance, a struggling waitress who risked everything by refusing to serve a deadly mistake, only to uncover layers of corruption and find unexpected redemption, we learn one of life's most heartfelt truths. Unwavering honesty, even when it costs you dearly, is the rarest and most powerful force in a world built on lies. Ara could have stayed silent, protected her fragile job, and let danger pass to save her brother, but her moral compass wouldn't allow it. In that terrifying moment, spilling the plate and facing ruin, she chose truth over survival, proving that integrity isn't a luxury for the powerful. It's the quiet strength of the overlooked that can topple empires. Julian Thorne, the hardened billionaire who'd lost faith in people, was transformed by her courage, reminded that real trust is earned through vulnerability, not wealth. This story stirs deep emotions because we've all faced moments where doing the right thing felt impossible, where fear whispered to compromise, to look away. Yet Ara shows us that standing firm, speaking up, and trusting our instincts can save lives, expose evil, and open doors we never imagined. It's a beautiful reminder that one honest act can ripple outward, healing wounds, restoring faith, and building something unbreakable. If Ara's raw bravery, the thrill of justice, and the tender triumph of truth moved you to tears or inspired your own courage, smash that like button. It helps spread these powerful stories of hope and integrity. What hit you hardest? Her decision to spill the plate, Julian's trust in her, or the sweet revenge of exposing the lies? Would you have had the guts to risk it all like Ara? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one and love connecting over these emotional journeys. And if you're hooked on more heart-pounding tales of underdogs, honesty, and life-changing moments, subscribe now and hit the bell icon. You won't want to miss next week's unforgettable story of redemption. Thank you for watching. See you soon.